right, so let's get into our discussion. The Human Sciences Research Council released a worrying report on gender-based violence in South Africa just yesterday. Now, it found that, among other issues, mental health problems faced by men in South Africa is the driving force against violence against women. Well, joining us on this discussion is, of course, a variety of guests. We are joined in studio by the Amataima Wellness Network founder, Tato Titi Mba. You know him very, very well. A good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a woman who wears many hats, an activist, a survivor, and so much more. Sindiswa Mbonambi in studio with us. On video link, we are joined by author and life coach Benji Motlowung. Good evening to you. Wise Collective Director Brenda Madumise Pajibo, and clinical psychologist at the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, or SADC, Dr. Mosa Malema. A lot to get through. We're taking your calls as well, 010-594-6010. Do you believe that mental health of men in South Africa is a big driving force behind the high levels of gender-based violence that we have in the country? Send a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584. We cannot wait to get your thoughts. I'm going to start with our guests here in studio. This is actually a very difficult discussion because for some, and Titi, I'll let you start first. Of course, it is also International Men's Day, so happy International Men's Day to you, and to Benji. And in the spirit of that, I'll let you go first. This is a really difficult discussion because some might argue, well, that makes excuses for violence against women and children as we get closer to 16 days of activism. But you hear that I suppose what's coming out of the Human Sciences Research Council. Do you agree with it?
Well, first of all, happy International Men's Day to all the good men out there. And I think it's a day that we can't allow just to go by and not acknowledge those good men that are out there. Secondly, you know, gender-based violence is of course a scourge that we're experiencing in our country, one that has got a lot of layers that we need to get to a point of unpacking. And yes, it is true that a lot of men are under a lot of mental distress. There's a lot of financial wellness-related distresses that also affect the mental state of a lot of men. One of the things that we never actually speak about is the plight of men when it comes to DNA testing and paternity testing. It's an issue that no one wants to talk about and leads to mental instability.
How?
Look at how many men have to discover later on in life that they're raising kids that are not theirs because the mother has hidden the paternity, and it's something that's prevalent, and it's a societal ill that no one wants to address, and how it affects the men. I mean, there's even TV shows where there's a court case where they tell the men that this is not your daughter or this is not your son. But no one actually digs deeper into the issue that affects that man after that. What happens to that man psychologically? It is another form of gender-based violence if you think about it, but no one wants to talk about it.
Yeah, that's a lot that you're saying there, because you've touched on financial stresses, and I think that if you look at the unemployment numbers, it's a big factor. And again, and I need to keep reiterating this over and over again, there is no excuse for gender-based violence. That we need to, I think, all agree on this panel. But certainly the driving forces behind the mentality of South African men needs to be analysed. Cindy, so I want to let you step in here. You're a survivor, right? Yes. And if you're keen, you can tell us about your own sort of trauma if you're keen to. But I'm also quite interested to hear what you make of this discussion. You actually do a lot of work with young men in our communities. What you make of this discussion, do you believe it?
Yes, I do. Echoing what this guy has just said now, and happy Men's International Day, men don't know how to be men, or boys are not taught how to be men. You look at movies, the men that are being glorified are doing crime, are gangsters, are what. So when they grow up, what they see is that men that if you want to have power, you need to be abusive, you need to be dominant, you need to take over, irregardless of how. So that's the part we are not educating those kids. You have attachment to this young girl. You've raised her up to 16. Later, you are told she's not yours. Now you have to detach from this princess that we have raised, and you don't know how to. There's no platform that wants to listen to you. I always say when I teach the boys, pain does not have gender. pain is a pain. This man, when he cries, guess who's laughing at that person? A society saying, you are a coward. How is he going to escape that pain? Alcohol, drugs, or he will go to the weakest link, which is a woman in this case. And guess what they do? They punch, because they are taking this aggression to that particular person who has nothing to do with that. And there's no father figure in the house. There's no father figure in the society. They don't know how to relate. Girls learn by hearing, men learn by seeing things. And what they see is not what reflects a good man. 5% are good, 95% are those ones that are doing all sorts of things that we don't want to mention. Like he said, no one wants to talk about the pain that men go through when they have to detach for whatever it is that they have attached themselves into. You are not a man because you have money. You are not a man because you work. It does not have to change your status that you don't have money or you are unemployed. You can contribute with various ways to be a man in the society, but the society does not give men that opportunity to do that. They put a price tag to them or a name, a label to say, you are only a man if you drive this certain car. How to get that car, you have to do this. Because I saw in movies, like I said, when you see a man taking things by force and dominating the society, they are being glorified. Then you think as a man, oh, so for me to have power and to be heard, this is what I have to do, which is wrong. And that dominates in what we are seeing now in our society.
Sure, that's concerning. Somewhere along the line, we lost track. But I want to look at the data that was put forward by the Human Sciences Research Council. So they did a survey of about 10,000 people, right? 4,400 of those are men. And one of the things that they found, in fact, Dr. Malema, I want to bring you in here. Good evening to you once again. One of the things that they've brought up is that they found that a significant number of men had experienced childhood trauma and bullying, some as perpetrators and others as victims, alcohol abuse experiences, and this is some of their data, right? And then they say 25.9% of South African men, according to this data, had a history of thinking about suicide. 31% of South African men had attempted to take their own lives before. So from SADC's point of view, can you agree with this data? And is it fair to link it to the numbers of gender-based violence that we have in the country, Dr. Malema?
Yes, good evening to you and the viewers. So most definitely, when there's a history of trauma, there would be a predisposition or a risk of developing mental illness. And even if it's not mental illness, it's going to be emotional development that is impaired, or it's going to be behaviors that are also quite maladaptive. So when there is that link between trauma and behaviors in adult life, relating to others, emotional regulation, managing conflict, and not knowing that violence is not a way of managing conflict. So definitely we would have situations where there is gender-based violence, which is a maladaptive behavior and an unhealthy way of resolving conflict that is definitely linked to those historical traumas.
Just quickly, let's stay with you, Dr. Malema. Do men reach out, though?
Sorry, do men reach out for help? Yes, they do reach out, but I still think that we still do have a long way to go. And there are still some disparities as well. We don't find that men who are more conservative really do reach out, but we find that men who are more exposed now to mental health, exposed through work, exposed through discourse that people have in public spaces with peers, we do see that those ones do present for help. Another interesting thing is that usually it's the youth, ages 25 up to perhaps 40. Older than that, we don't usually have sound statistics on that.
Yeah, that's actually quite telling then about a generational pattern that seems to be breaking, but more needs to be done. And speaking of which, Benji, I want to bring you in here because you have quite the story, right? You yourself are a victim of abuse, childhood abuse, groomed by an older woman as well, sexually abused as a child, depression, and 3 attempts of suicide. And you've written a book, and you're also the founder of Open the Can of Worms. Such important work that I believe you do, and your story is so important. And perhaps you can share with us about what you make of this very discussion. But one of the things that I found particularly interesting is the fact that in your own story, there isn't a link to all the abuse that you've suffered and you're acting out by violence against women. So what do you make of this discussion? Are we making excuses?
Yes and no. Thank you for having me. Look, I'm not a victim anymore. I'm a victor. But now the million-dollar question is, how many men out there or how many boys out there are going through what I went through or have gone through what I went through but could not receive the grace that I got? One of the things I say when I talk to inmates is that the difference between me and you is that you're wearing orange overalls. I could have been with you behind bars, but by the grace, I am here talking to you. Now, the truth of the matter is that today we're talking about men. We're celebrating Men's International Day. That's good. That's good. However, I personally feel that we are not going to the root of the problem. We are a society that continues to try to fix the ceiling, while the reason why our ceiling is in trouble is because of our roof. We neglect a boy child. We don't allow him to be human. We don't allow him to express his pain, his feelings. We don't pay attention to him. We hardly say, how was school? Who are your friends? Is anybody bullying you? And this boy child grows up with all these feelings and emotions suppressed because you can only blow a balloon up to so far. Now, when he becomes a man, the nearest person will pay the price for what happened to this boy since he was a child. In my case, by God's grace, I did not cause any physical harm to anyone, specifically to a woman. However, it caused harm to me. Hence, I became depressed and I tried taking my life. Why did I try taking my life? Stigma. We grew up hearing this from our parents that, we shouldn't express how we feel. Our parents got it from their parents. It's a generational issue. It's a generational curse. It requires the adults of today, not only men, but even mothers of today, to go to a boy child and say, if anything is hurting you, talk to me about it. And it's okay to say it hurts. It's okay to cry. So that when this boy grows up, we will not have to have a problem about him being a monster. I personally believe that a community that won't allow their boy child to be human will soon deal with men behaving like animals. So it starts with the boy child. If we heal the men of today, then the men of today can go to their boys and say, let me show you or let me teach you how to be a man. And it has got nothing to do with suppressing your feelings and emotions.
Yeah. Brenda, I want to bring you in here because you do work with the WISE Collective, and what's interesting is you obviously represent women that have been victims of gender-based violence, and I'm keen to hear what you think of this discussion. Because on the flip side of when we look at the data and we say, okay, according to the Human Sciences Research Council, 31% of men have tried to take their own lives, but also, as part of that data, 31% of women who took part in the research said they'd experienced physical or sexual violence perpetrated by a partner. And you look at the numbers in our country, and for the most part, this is what women are willing to admit to, right? Some women simply keep quiet. Are we going to the root of the issue, or are we creating, I suppose, a cushioning for perpetrators of gender-based violence? Brenda.
Good evening. No, I don't think we are offering or creating a shield for anyone. I think let's be clear of the language that we use. When we talk of gender-based violence or gendered violence, we're including both men and women. So there's never been a time where men's abuse was not spoken about. Why we highlight women in the manner that we do is precisely because it's the highest in most instances. And we can't argue with that because the data that you're referring to literally shows you all of that, right? The second aspect that I want to address is that the reason why most times the abuse that is suffered by men is not out in the public domain in the way women are is because of how machismo and masculinity is framed and how men look at themselves and believe that they cannot show their vulnerability at any given time because of how they are socialized, right? And we need to accept all those things that we have done, right? We still want to. There's conversation that boys must be men, and when you go deep and ask the question, what does that mean? No one gives you a real answer. What constitutes a man, right? And what a man is supposed to be doing. In fact, how we have been portraying men all over the world and even this country, it's about demonstrating control and power. And we need to be honest about that, that my masculinity gives me control and power, and that's why we believe that women are possessions. And that's why in the study, it will tell you that the men who have been interviewed told us that they want their women to obey them. That's control and power, right? So understand that mental health, substance abuse, patriarchy, norms and practices, cultural practices are all structural drivers of gender violence. It's not an excuse. We can't say because I was drunk, I became violent. It's not an excuse. It's how we are accepting that it's a driver. It's not the cause. It's not the reason why you're violent. It's not the reason why you rape a woman. It's not the reason why you sexually assault or harass a woman. So let's understand the language that we use.
So critical. What the study says, and Brenda, you've alluded to, the study also speaking about South African men believing that women should obey their husband, but also what the study also found is that men, I think it was just over, a quarter of the men that were surveyed believe that women cannot refuse to have sex with their partners, that they have to agree to sex with their partners. A quarter, that's a significant amount. But of course, we're taking your WhatsApps on 072-110-5584. It can be a video or a text as well as a voice note. Let's see some of those messages now. Evening, Naledi. Men have mental health issues. You find married couples, the husband is not working, the wife is working, and she starts to lay conditions in the house. Then the husband must now bow to his wife, and the problem starts in the family. Tobela, good evening, Menaledi. As men, we're going through a lot, and no one gives us attention to hear us out. We are husbands only when we're working. Please help us out. Anonymous. Again, and I want to say this, as these comments come in about the pressures that men face, how do our viewers connect this to the levels of gender-based violence? Let us know, right? Tumelo says men must loosen up and think everything is upon their shoulders. Where one cannot carry a load, they must speak out and ask for assistance. So keep those WhatsApps coming in. And of course, we are also taking your calls on 010-594-6010. Do we have a caller on the line? Okay, we will certainly take those calls in a moment. Let's take a short break, though. We'll continue in a moment. All right, according to the Human Sciences Research Council, 31% of men have attempted to take their own lives. And then, of course, it speaks to some of the data that the council has shared, saying that the mental health crises of South African men is a driving force in the gender-based violence numbers that we do see in the country. And we're taking your calls on 010-594-6010 and your WhatsApps on 072-110-5584. You are watching Newsfeed PM, the late edition. Still in conversation with Amataima Wellness Network founder Tato Titimba, gender-based violence survivor, and a woman who does so much more, particularly working with young men, vulnerable young men, Cindy Swambonambi. On our video link, we're joined by author and life coach Benji Mutloung, WISE Collective Director Brenda Madumise Pajibo, and clinical psychologist with the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, Dr. Musa Malema. I want to bring it back to you, TT, because you do work with Amataima.
Yes.
And through all of these issues that we've explored before the break, what we haven't talked about is the fathers in our lives. And I think what you do is so important. Talk to us about why it's so important to introduce the role of fatherhood. And if we have exemplary fathers sufficiently in the most vulnerable of our communities.
So the Amatama, Brotherhood Circle is really about the wellness of men who are single, married, divorced, and widowed. And we want to really take a deeper dive into what really causes most of these issues that men experience, especially when it comes to fathering. A lot of us were raised by fathers who were strict, who had a particular way of doing things. And in many instances, most of us are actually broken. We are highly scarred as men, and we're carrying those scars onto the little ones as we navigate this thing called fatherhood. And I think what we've done well in terms of the Brotherhood Circle is create a platform through a WhatsApp group where you actually get to appreciate what men are going through. And through those stories that men get to share about what they are struggling with and challenges actually come solutions. So in that group, you are able to navigate and understand that there are men who are in positions of power that you think don't actually go through depression, and they actually do. And this is actually a harsh reality that we are experiencing through this group. And we're getting to learn and unlearn a lot of things, actually, in terms of how we were raised. And I think that's one of the things that we actually need to be deliberate about if we are to build a society of good men, that these boys can have role models to look up to. Because right now, it's pretty hard for these young boys to have role models who are actually broken.
Yeah. I'm trying to imagine what it looks like to be in a room where a circle of men of different ages, different sort of social status is sitting together and having real heart-to-hearts about, the many challenges that they face and how they have enacted that in their daily lives. But we're going to take calls. Tumelo is on the line this evening. Tumelo, thank you so much for calling. Let us know where you're calling from and what are your thoughts on our discussion. Tumelo, good evening. Okay, Tumelo's dropped the phone. Taking your calls on 010-594-6010. When you speak to Sisinde, so some of the young men that you work with, some of them nyaupe addicts, and that speaks to some of the hopelessness, right? Talk to me about what conversations you hear from them about their relationship with women.
I'll tell you about a boy I spoke to recently. He's about 16. He was sexually abused by someone older because he wanted a phone. He does have a mom and dad, and now the feelings are dead because he does not connect with his peers. When you ask them, why are you doing this? I don't have a father. I don't know how to be a father. Men are wired to produce, to protect, and to provide. But what they are not told is how to do these things, how to provide, how to protect. Protecting to them is to use firearms, is to use violence, is to use domination, to say, I control you, you are my possession. They don't know those things. You ask one, why are you not doing something different? I've never seen anyone who is reading in my society. All I see is them driving fast cars. And for me, that fascinates me because these people are being glorified. I'll tell you about my story a bit. I was in an abusive relationship. This man did not know who he was. For him to have power is to belittle me, is to break me. Then it gives him more power to say, I lead. When I say do this, you must say yes. So when I challenge, it was an issue for him because no one ever said no to him. So when I say no, it sounded like an insult to him to say, you can never tell me this, until I spoke to his mom. And his mom said, this man did not have a father. He does not know, because what we know, women are to love and to nature generally. Automatically it comes. If you see a child as a mom, you take care of them. A man does not know how to do this thing. Like I said, we glorify those people who are drug lords, who are gangsters, who are bosses.
Outward strength.
Yes.
Physical strength.
Yes, and we do those things. So no one sits a man down and say, it's okay to cry. It's okay to break down. It's okay to feel the way you do. It's okay to do those things.
Yeah, okay. Let's hear from Tumelo in Vereniging. Thanks for calling in, Tumelo. Good evening to you. What are your thoughts?
Hi, Naledi. How are you?
I'm well, sir. What do you think of our discussion? What do you want to put on the table?
Yes, and the listeners of Newzroom. You know, Naledi, one thing that I normally share with guys is that the real power is with you. As a person, you must have power to yourself. Because I want to praise my mom, wherever she is now. you know, that you won't have a power on another person. And when another person maybe is enough with you, or maybe don't love you anymore, as a person, you must respect that. As a man, you must respect that. It is not to say people are going to laugh at you or going to joke, but at least know that you are respecting that person.
Yeah.
I think that's what we should learn as men, that you cannot force someone to be on your side when the person is enough.
But here's the thing, Tumelo, yeah, and I hear the point, because you're saying it as a way of seeing your own power in your own life, but there is the psychological element of it, right? And that it's not that simple, and that those spaces of healing, dealing with the mental health issues need to be addressed. Dumela, thank you so much for that, though, because I think a very important point that has been made, a great contribution on how to frame the power of men. But Brenda, I want to bring you back in here and say, from an institutional point of view in the country, where have we failed? You know, we've got the Department of Social Development, for instance. Does it have the resources to deal with this? We've got a Department for Women and Children. Quite often when you speak to the department, they say they simply don't have the resources to execute some of the programs that they put down on paper. So from an institutional governmental point of view, are we creating spaces for us to, I suppose, deal with all of these issues around masculinity in the country? Who's dropping the ball here institutionally, Brenda?
If we talk at an institutional level, we need to look at the we almost, you know, from government to private sector to development funders and everybody else. I mean, we need to look at almost all of them, and that's why you have the National Strategic Plan on gender-based violence. That is supposed to be the roadmap for every single institution in this country on how to address and attend to gender-based violence. And if you ask the question now, how many private sector organizations, how many government departments have got that document and understand its contents and understand what role they should be playing as a government department, is dismal. And we know that because we have interacted with, and we have asked the question, right? One of the key things that was supposed to come out of that National Strategic Plan was a gender-based violence council, a coordinating body, because remember, the interventions, the programs are desperate. They're all over the show. And that's why we have not seen the impact that we are making in this fight against gender-based violence, precisely because we are all over the show. It's civil society organizations doing what they can with the little resources that they have. You've got government that drops the ball tomorrow because they're focusing on another priority. So we have not been consistent and constant in our interventions on gender-based violence. And unless we have a constant plan on how we address prevention, how we address care and support, how we address empowerment of women so that they're not dependent on men and can live a peaceful relationship, on how we address data. We've got the data now. For the first time, we've got a national survey that tells us about what the prevalence of gender-based violence in this country. We now need to understand how we are going to institutionalize that study in everyday work of every government department at national, at provincial, at local government, and all the institutions that support this democracy, and some of the institutions in the private sector. I know for a fact that civil society is going to do its bit, because it continues to do its bit anyway, without any support from government. So, you know, the ball is in government's court. They were given this study today. Let's see what happens. What needs to happen as a matter of urgency is that they need to convene all the stakeholders and decide on how we are going to interact with the document, especially the recommendations, how we make them real.
Yeah, you know, you talk about the role of civil society, and I think about the work done by SADC. Dr. Malema, I bring you in here. As someone who has actually used the service of SADC themselves, I can also put on the table that I've seen just how effective that service really can be. I mean, you've got people at SADC that can also call you back months later for a check-in. Very, very interesting work being done there. And so, Dr. Malema, this is what I want to hear from you. Can we see reform So a man in South Africa is dealing with serious pressure, perhaps even violent actions, and I'm sure these are cases that you've seen in your own work. Have you seen change? The question is, can someone who is a perpetrator of abuse, even if it is because of mental health pressures, and again, no excuses, be reformed, Dr. Malema?
It is possible, but then there are different factors that would determine whether this person actually gets better or whether there would be a resolution to the issues that they present with. So if someone comes with the trauma of having witnessed violence, that there is work to be done and that person is likely to actually get better. But if the violence that we find with this person or that they actually present with, it's due to personality problems, so psychopathy, there may not be any changes, and usually there aren't any. And the only way of rehabilitating is through incarceration, but we don't always have, those resources in communities, and we cannot just throw people in jail. So unfortunately, with those ones, the interventions are only when they present, when they're now in contravention with the law. But otherwise, if it's something related to emotional problems, it's related to trauma, there definitely is hope there.
Sure. And you reminded us, did you hear that?
I actually wanted to pick up on what she said earlier on about government and private sector involvement. Now, we acknowledge the facts and the stats that say that the biggest perpetrators of gender-based violence are men. However, the biggest challenge is that when we, as organizations that focus on men and fathers and boys, put together events or interventions that need government and private sector support, we get rejected.
Yeah.
But put together a Women's Day event, you'll get sponsors galore. Now, how are we supposed to address some of these issues? By creating platforms for men to be able to deal with the issue if we don't get the support from private sectors and government. And that's our biggest struggle as the Amatama Brotherhood Circle and many other men's forums that go out there to source or seek funding for us to actually have these summits and conferences, and we just can't get the financial backing that we actually need to be able to address these issues.
That's concerning.
It's extremely concerning.
That means that there's very little commitment to this cause. So not just in a societal level, but at an institutional level. I want to read this WhatsApp quickly. Peter Ntamu from Men for God organization says, beautiful discussion that must lead to a working, practical solution. How can one be in a WhatsApp group of Amataima? I want to be a social father, embracing more boys who experience the pain of absent fathers. I'm so encouraged by, the people saying, okay, let's step forward and do something about it. Benji, I want to bring you back in here, though. The same question that I asked to Dr. Malema, I think I want to bring back to you, Benji, and that is, do you believe that abusers can be reformed? And again, Dr. Malema reiterating the fact that once you are an abuser, you have committed a crime. So part of that rehabilitation, because a crime has been committed, may very well need to be incarceration. But can we see reform? Benji, do you believe in it? Benji, are you there with us? Okay, Benji giving us some trouble there with some connectivity, but Cindy, so I want to let you take that one.
I believe that if there's a space, like they said, and consistency, men, you have to repeat it like a national anthem for them to hear it. They're very slow. Like I said, men learn by seeing things happen. They are action-based. And women, we can tell, chop it and do this and do this, they will do it. Men, you have to do it physically. But you doing it physical does not lessen him from being a man. Like I said, a lot of families, they know men to be, you have to have money, you have to have strength, you have to have this, you have to have that. If you don't have those things, if somebody committed a crime and they realize, being taught, this is what you were supposed to do then, now you can do better. I believe that when you know better, Amataima, you will do better. You will unlearn whatever it is that you have learned from your parents, which was not okay for you, and you can do better moving forward. They can be taught if they are given a space and an opportunity to hear what they are saying. They are not speaking our language. They speak through physical actions. Yeah. You need to speak that language, but in a loving manner, if I may put it like that.
It needs to be seen.
Yes, they need to see how you do it. Hence, I'm saying in our society, there's no role models. They are there, but you pinpoint like stars. They are there. But when it comes to women, you put a proposal today, tomorrow the event is there. Men, either they laugh at you, either they think you are a coward, either who are you? What he knows is, oh, that guy, he owns 5 gangs.
Eish.
He owns 2 guns.
Yeah.
He's doing this. I want to be like that one, because there's no one who is studying in my society who is doing good. The ones who are doing good, I barely see them there.
Yeah. All right. We're going to take a quick caller. Peter's in Midrand. Peter, good evening. Thanks for calling. What are your thoughts?
Thank you very much. Thank you for this beautiful opportunity to say, men, you can just take the bull by the horn and say, let's do it. We have been passive recipients of things that are happening. It's high time that men should say, not in our name. I'm interested in addressing men who should make a difference, men in churches, men who are becoming abusive. You know, people are boxing churches, but they don't care about the God of the church. Men are singing choruses non-stop, but they don't care about the God of those choruses. Men should come out and say, this month, this thing should be, it's okay. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be okay to therapy, and this is how men can help.
And as we wrap up this discussion around the findings of the Human Sciences Research Council, that the mental health crises of men in South Africa is a big driving force towards the high numbers of gender-based violence in the country. Let's look at where the opportunities are really to pluck it at the root. And we're going to go through all of our guests now. And Dr. Musa Malema, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, in 20 seconds, platforms that are available and opportunities for us to get to the root of mental health issues for men in the country.
So it would be, you know, from the psychology point of view, it would, of course, be psychotherapy and individuals accessing psychotherapy. And often they would be referred for programs within the context in which they're consulting. And then that can be taken over by other mental health care professionals like social work. Yeah, and then access to those services through public health also possible. And the ones who can afford private health care can also access those services.
Okay, so get in touch with SADC for that. Benji, what are you working on?
Well, we're working on healing men. We're working on healing the boy child. We're working on trying to make society understand that both males and females are equally human. And we are available on this number 072-041-8029. 072-041-8029. Benji Mutlo on all social media platforms. 072-041-8029. Brenda, programs that you're running?
So we've got a program, Believe Her. It's a program believing women when they tell us that they've been raped or sexually assaulted or sexually harassed. We then do many cases that are strategic litigation where we're changing the jurisprudence so that then the language that the courts even must use forthwith is an understanding of how gender-based violence manifests itself.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and we'll be watching that program as well. You've already got a text saying, TT, bring us into Amatimer.
Yes, so we are on Facebook and Instagram. The page is Amatimer_SA. You can go there and click on the link that has the support group. That support group will take you to our WhatsApp group. We've got about 500 men in that group, men from all walks of life, men who are single, married, divorced, widowed, heterosexual, bisexual, homosexual, employed, entrepreneurs, unemployed men. It's a beautiful group where you can actually learn. So we've got the personal side and the business side. And the business side is really created for men to link each other with opportunities in terms of work, jobs, because we do understand that there's a big plight of men who are unemployed, and that does have a negative effect on their mental state and wellness. It's a great group where we actually learn from each other, and we actually pour our hearts out, rather, and get to learn from other men. There's also professionals in that group who are there to offer their life coaching skills and whatever services that are out there for the guys. So
I wish I could see it because it sounds so beautiful, you know, but of course it's a space for men.
It's a tough group to be in, because then you actually start to appreciate how vulnerable the men are. And I'll encourage every man out there, every uncle, brother, if you want to be part of a movement that really focuses on our wellness, you need to join this WhatsApp group.
Yeah, and Cindy, I know you're focusing on young men.
Yes, it's my identity restoration from the age of 7 up to 19. And then we educate in terms of who you are. We allow you to be yourself and understand what it is to be a man. We are on Facebook. It's my identity restoration campaign.
Yeah. Guys, thank you so much for all the work that you do. And every little bit makes such a massive contribution. So I really hope that all your efforts continue to grow and grow and grow. We've got more WhatsApps though that have come in on this discussion. Let's take a look at some of those that have poured in this evening. Muzi in Ermelo says financial stress and unemployment may be the cause for mental health for men. COVID-19 lockdown has taught us most lovers are strangers, especially when there was a rise of GBV cases during lockdown, as lovers were forced to stay together unemployed with financial stress. That was a very stressful period indeed. Yeah. Deborah from Kempton Park, Hana lady, most of us young men do not receive proper training and teaching from our elders, and this thing is affecting us now. Deborah, an interesting one. A lot of people say they grew up in violent households, and so it is their normal for so many. Nene in Pretoria says, evening, a lady, this gender-based violence matter is not about mental things, but about being with a bullying partner. And that was a point as well that I think was raised by Brenda to say, your actions, you're still accountable for. Simpiwe in East London says, I agree with the data. Mental health manifests itself with passive aggression. You cannot be physically abusive, but emotionally, one can also become a monster, and men then draw from the negative masculinity. Simpiwe, thank you so much for sending in that message. And as we wrap up the discussion, keep the messages coming in, but do remember that a crime is still very much a crime in South Africa, and that needs to be dealt with. But the root of it, of course, equally important. We take a short break. We've got your headlines at the top of the hour.